Greetings. I'd like to spend a little bit of time focusing on Chapter 12, Geography, Profiling, and Predatory Criminals. One thing I need to mention right away in regards to geography, profiling, and violent crimes is that technology is often used and is changing so rapidly that even as I make this video today, I fear that by tomorrow it will be outdated. Something new will come along very shortly and replace some of the technology we have currently in place. And certainly so I highly recommend to keep up in the technology area as it relates to profiling violent crimes. And looking at the role of geography, some of the considerations that we might take a look at, for example, would be the distance. And distance is always relative to the offender, what is considered close or what is considered far. And also we want to look at the method of transportation. Does an offender use an automobile, a van, a bicycle? Do they walk to the site? Do they take a train or subway? We also want to look at push-pull factors or attractiveness of the locations or the methods of transportation available, and also the familiarity that one may have with roads and highways. Does the crime occur in a highly trafficked area or an area that is very remote? And we can also look at if there's different types of barriers to certain locations, and are there alternate routes, and can we try to come up with a assumption of a mental map of an offender who has committed several crimes by geographically linking the crime scenes. We can also look at the elements of a spatial mental image of a perpetrator, that we could look at the location of their own residence, of their friends, where they work if they work, their recreational outlets, their paths or routes of travel, and centers of activity or nodes, and also geographic reference points or landmarks. We're trying to put together a picture here, a mental picture of what how a particular person behaves based on their geographical and environment. And there's some computer programs that are available to criminal justice researchers and investigators that help to predict the general vicinity where an offender might reside based on the linking various or several crimes together. And that is something we still, of course, have to look at, that many offenders tend to commit crimes close to their residence, or it may be in between their work and their residence, or an area that is familiar. Although as some offenders become more successful and comfortable with their criminal activities, they may move farther. And so in essence, we're going to try to assess the offender's comfort zone from a geographical perspective. And that kind of helps us to begin to look at some of the general features, but then we want to focus on more specific aspects, such as the actual encounter site. Where does the victim and the perpetrator meet? And also the attack site, which may be the same place they meet or may be different, or the crime site. Where a victim who is killed is disposed of, and if a vehicle is also dumped or disposed of related to the crime. And you can begin to see how this works, for example, in certain serial murder cases. There was clear links between where the offender met the victims. In one case I'm thinking of, the offender killed many prostitutes, and he would pick up the prostitutes along a strip in the community, a particular road that was well known as a prostitution place, and then he would hire the prostitute for sexual activities, and he would drive in his truck several miles from the location to a remote forest type area near a river, where he would then kill the victim, and then he would bury the bodies out by the river, and then he would return home. And so in this case, we can try to put it all together to kind of see his mental map that he operated from. And of course, this helps investigation after the crimes, but also this helps in solvability in trying to catch the perpetrator or perpetrators. In looking at computerized geographical analysis, certainly you want to review the case file very carefully and look at the crime scene and area photographs. Also, interviews with anyone who may have relevant information is extremely important. And many times people may not think that they know anything, but if you ask them to describe in rich detail what they observed, if things seemed out of the ordinary, that may help. Certainly, if you were a lead investigator, you'd want to visit each of the crime sites or scenes, and you'd also want to begin to incorporate an analysis of the demographic variables related to the general area, and begin to analyze the street, the land use, and transit maps, and put this all into a computerized analysis where you could organize, especially if you have several similar crimes that have taken place, you could begin to link them. And I do mention linking crimes is extremely important in this area, and so this information should be shared with other investigators, with other law enforcement specialists, because perpetrator or perpetrators may be operating in different cities or counties and states for that matter. And certainly we do have available in some communities, we actually have databases that are used by law enforcement professionals that help us to link crimes. And finally, what I would like to mention briefly is the use of technology. And again, I mentioned that changes so rapidly, but think about how GPS devices might be used to assist a criminal profiler or investigator, and also computerized mapping programs, and social networking sites as well, that sometimes we have discovered the perpetrators of crimes from either their YouTube postings, their Facebook pages, or some other social networking, MySpace, for example. They may present some information about the crime, and that may be something that we need to become adept at searching and understanding. Also, satellite imagery may be helpful, and as well as surveillance video, which is very pronounced and or I should say very common in some areas. And of course, other sources of technology that may be useful in terms of preventing crimes from occurring in the first place, but also of quick resolution to criminal activity, and maybe even apprehension before a victim is killed, in cases, for example, of kidnapping, where some may carry GPS tracking devices in their pockets or backpacks, or the foreseeable future. It wouldn't surprise me if people had GPS tracking devices implanted into their bodies, and so they could be tracked by trusted individuals or law enforcement professionals if the need be. And this wraps up this video.